everybody. Welcome. Get settled. Welcome to both New York City and London.
Yeah, we're international.
Bringing live with Atlantic across the ocean. That's sort of the beauty, huh? Take a moment to digest what's on the screen. Nothing hyper complicated, and today's fairly low tech, so you should, as long as you've got a working internet, you should be good. I'm Claire, I'm the Director of Marketing at Atlantic. I'm thrilled to welcome all of you. If it's your first Live with Atlantic, welcome. If it's not your first, thanks for coming back. We're happy to have you. We're gonna be together for about an hour. The first 45 minutes or so will be a conversation between Alice and Simon. And if you guys have questions that you'd like to ask them along the way, feel free to use the Q&A at the bottom of your screens. You can enter the question and then we'll compile and then select a couple depending on how much time we have at the end of our hour together. And of course, feel free to use that Q&A if you encounter any technical difficulties that we can help you with. Hopefully everything will be smooth, but if you do, let us know. We rely on the internet. Hopefully nothing will go wrong there as well, but if it does, we'll take care of it swiftly and get you guys out of here by about 5 p.m. Eastern time. And otherwise, welcome. Neil, do you want to take it from here?
Yes, sure. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Neil Pepe. I'm the Artistic Director of The Atlantic. We're so thrilled to have you guys here. And this is Live with The Atlantic, and it's our second Writers Reflect. And we have our two extraordinary writer friends, Alice Birch and Simon Stevens. We've done at Atlantic 3 plays of Simon's, Bluebird, Harper Regan, and On the Shore of the Wide World. And our most recent production at Atlantic was Alice's incredible play, Anatomy of a Suicide, which we almost got through the entire run. We had to cancel 3 or 4 performances just as the COVID hit. So before I hand it over to you two, I just wanted to say to everyone out there, thank you again for tuning in. We are working hard and doing everything at Atlantic to get back to live theater when we can. And before that, you know, we're just trying to survive. So we rely on generous donations. If you enjoy any of this free programming, we hope you'll consider making a donation of any size to Atlantic. But just thank you. These are strange times, and we're so grateful to have our friends from London tuning in with us to talk to us. So thank you both. It's great to have you. And I'm gonna leave the screen and hand it over to you guys, but I'll be here still virtually. So welcome, Alice, and welcome, Simon.
Thanks, Neil.
Thank you. Thanks.
It's quite exciting. He's going to leave the room. He's leaving us in charge now.
I know.
We could say anything. We could do anything.
Go for it, quick.
How are you, mate? You all right?
Yeah, I'm okay, thanks. I mean, I'm the new, the new okay, which is not okay.
What's the, I have to apologise to you mainly. I'm apologising to the entirety of New York City. In my mind, everybody in New York City is watching this now. So hello to all of New York, the entire population, but mainly to be honest, because I'm so sweaty. I've not just had a shower that I've not bothered to dry myself properly from.
That's okay, you can't tell.
I've cycled like a bullet across London.
And you've cycled across London from
a rehearsal room.
I mean, what's going on?
There is hope. There is hope, theatre world.
Yeah, you're doing a play.
I'm doing a play of sorts. It's been announced, so I can talk about it.
Great.
I adapted. It's been over the past kind of 3 years. I've made an adaptation of. Have you ever come across the Portuguese Nobel laureate José Saramago?
I know. Yeah, I mean, I know, but not the book that you have adapted.
Right. Yeah. So his extraordinary novel Blindness. Mm-hmm. I've been working on the adaptation for about 3 years. Do you know anything about it? It's a distressing, chilling book, but I find it ultimately kind of rather profoundly uplifting. It's a story about an epidemic of infectious blindness. It starts off at the kind of traffic lights of of an unnamed European city, when a guy at the front of the traffic lights waiting for them to turn green goes suddenly, without any medical reason or explanation, blind. He experiences a kind of white blindness.
Oh my God.
And he goes to the doctors, and within 24 hours, everybody in the reception also becomes blind. And the epidemic of blindness spreads through the city, and the blind and the people who live with the blind are taken to a disused mental hospital on the furthest peripheries of the city, where they live in enforced quarantine. And there's only one person amongst them who's the wife of the eye doctor who can see, and she bears witness and testimony to the experiences of the quarantine and the disused mental hospital, and to what happens when it burns to the ground and they're free. And I thought that's exactly what people would want to see.
Do you
So-
care that you've been doing this for 3 years?
I've been working on it for 3 years. I've been working with the brilliant English-based German director Walter Meyer-Johann,
Yeah.
who was the former artistic director at Home in Manchester. He brought the book to me kind of 2016, I think. He's been wanting to do it for 15 years. We originally conceived it as a massive epic piece for dance that we were hoping to work with somebody like Crystal Pike or Hoffe Schechter.
Yeah.
And as we worked on it, we distilled it to a monologue that is to which the brilliant Juliet Stevenson is attached.
Yeah.
Who's, I don't know how known she is in New York or internationally, but you know Alice in England, she's a legend. She's a beautiful. She almost certainly would be a dame if she probably hadn't rejected the title on political grounds. And then Walter gave the adaptation to Michael Longhurst, who's the artistic director of the brilliant Donmar Warehouse, and he had the idea of producing it as a sound installation.
And did he have that idea pre these times as well?
No, Michael is the canny one.
Okay.
He read our version just at the very start of lockdown.
Brilliant.
And his version of it is that he kind of fell in love with it. And he thought that he very much wanted to produce it during the pandemic.
Amazing.
Rather than after the pandemic.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a socially distanced sound installation, light and sound installation. The Ringham brothers, who I don't know if you know the Ringham brothers, Max and Ben Ringham. Have you worked with them?
I've never. No. I mean, a little bit in sort of workshops, but never all
Right.
the way through. But they are, in terms of sound design in this country, like the most important. Like right up there. They're brilliant.
Yeah,
That's
they're
great.
extraordinary. And Lizzie Clacken is designing, and it's going to be a kind of 3-part experiential exploration through this novel. And Juliet's we've been recording the soundtrack this week.
So you've been in rehearsals, working with an actor and a director.
With an actor and a director and designers, without a stage manager, it has to be said, which might be why we've been running 2 hours over every day. But,
Amazing.
It's felt really, really special. It's felt, it's a remarkable thing that we do.
Yeah.
And I feel. How have you found the? Are you feeling? Are you finding it difficult, lockdown?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, but I think not for. I mean, I have a very small baby, so it's kind of, so she's 8 months old, and I have a 5-year-old. So I find it really hard to sort of answer that question as a writer, really, because it's just not even been in the, like, you just grab time when you can, but it's but no, it's just been very, very intense having a baby. You sort of, so I've been focused on that. I haven't and been very lucky in terms of coronavirus. It hasn't really felt like it's impacted in that sense. So it's been hard in a delightfully normal, expected way.
Right.
You know?
Have you been detached from grandparents and kind of helpful others that might muck in and help
Yeah.
out with those first few months? That's hard, mate. That's really tough.
Yeah. I mean, it's just weird that no one else will have a memory of her at this age. You know, it's just there's something quite like special about that as well. You know, but yeah, that's the sad thing. But
Yeah.
that's another. I'm sure there's I'm sure there's plays in that. I'm sure there will be. But in terms of writing, I mean, I have been writing, but I've been writing pretty much exclusively for screen, and all of those things have been adaptations. So there's always been like, I think if I had been trying to dig into something for myself, a piece of theatre, a play that was just mine, that I had to begin now, I think I would choke. I don't think I could do it. But the sort of being able to lean on some scaffolding of an adaptation has been a relief.
Do you like adaptation?
Yes, but it's like a completely different muscle. Do you think?
I mean, I've never adapted for screen. I'm just doing because you're a quite successful screenwriter. I think I'm a startlingly unsuccessful screenwriter. I think my screen career is defined by my profound lack of success. But no, come on, no, because if in Britain, I think probably throughout the world, television has become something of a crutch for people in kind of who are looking for a dramatic life. And there's been a handful of shows, certainly in Britain, and probably because of that their Netflix or Amazon or whatever it is internationally. Killing Eve 3 was a crutch for people throughout the world. In the UK, James Graham's Quiz was a crutch, but normal people.
Yeah.
Normal people is like has been absolutely in the centre of people's thinking for the past 4 months, and that's you, mate.
Yeah. That's the incredible Sally Rooney. But yes, no, you're being nice. That was a very nice job. But
How do you go about doing it? How do you make an adaptation for a novel for screen?
well, that's a good question. I don't know. How do you? You just
You have
do.
a process.
Yes, I think so. Normally on an adaptation, I didn't do this on normal people. Maybe I should, because it was successful. But normally, when I've adapted something for screen, I write the book out first by hand. That's the first job.
What, the entire book?
Yeah.
You copy the entire book out by hand?
Yeah. That's a really good idea.
You're crazy. Sorry. Why'd you do that?
Because you won't miss anything, and because you have to get as close to another writer's process and language. And also, you will miss things, but hopefully it takes you into a slightly unconscious state, which is necessary when writing. And also it's something to do. Like when you're stuck, you've got to have some things that you know how to do, and I know how to copy a book out by hand.
But you're handwriting it, not typing it when you say by hand.
Handwriting, yeah.
So I've not adapted for screen successfully. I've adapted for stage.
Yes.
Blindness is the second of 3, and I always do the dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
I do type it out though.
Yeah, no.
Not handwriting.
That's good.
Why do you handwrite? What does that give you?
Again, I think I suppose it just feels like a really intimate thing to do. It feels very, and I think that's important. You want to be able to have as an intimate relationship with the text as possible with the primary piece of material, so that you have permission to go very far from it.
Yeah.
I sort of need to pretend that I wrote it. I need to pretend that I'm as clever as Sally Rooney, although I didn't do it on normal people, just because for lack of time. But I really enjoy it. It's sort of I think it means you can be thorough, and just get up close to it. I think.
What do you do then?
Well, there are a lot more people involved in telly and film. So certainly with the telly stuff I've done, then there are sort of people who produced episode outlines or Bibles or character guides or sort of beat sheets or things you have to hit, and it becomes quite technical. It becomes which is why it feels like it comes from somewhere else, I suppose. Like it's It's a different muscle. Yeah.
It's really extraordinary. I'm slightly embarrassed that I had such a physical and extreme reaction to the news that you write entire novels out by hand, but actually it's very beautiful.
Oh, thanks. It's a bit, it's probably a bit weird, but it's been helpful so far. So you keep doing it, don't you? But I do genuinely think one of the reasons I do it is because there's something to do.
Right.
And like those are necessary sometimes when you get stuck.
When you say you go into the kind of unconscious, I really want to ask you what that means. I know that's a tremendously hard question, because I guess the unconscious, by the nature of it being unconscious, means that you're never conscious of it.
Yeah. Though, like, or maybe it's, when you're writing sometimes, and this happens very rarely for me, or it takes me a long time to get there, the bit where you're writing and you're not really, it's not as thoughtful, not thoughtful, but it's not as, there are less gaps. Yeah. It's sort of like, you're in a sort of rhythm or something of it, I suppose.
Yeah.
And that you might look back at it and you might be slightly surprised by what you wrote.
Do you do that in your original work as well? Do you try and tap onto the unconscious in your original work?
For sure, definitely. Do you?
Yeah, more and more.
Great.
And
Right.
more and more, and increasingly in recent years, I use handwriting as well.
Do you?
Yeah,
you
use notebooks.
And do you write plays out, like dialogue out?
I've never done that. I know you've done that. Have you done that?
No, I don't, but our mutual friend, Ali
McDowell. But that's only because he's never heard of a computer, because he lives in the 19th century.
Yeah.
He's like a Dickensian character.
Oh.
No, he's a beautiful, beautiful human. And it's not just because he's never heard of a computer. He does. What I do is I use, with my original work, increasingly, it strikes me increasingly in the creativity of art, there are kind of 3 stages that I've started to think about, which would be, this is a purely subjective understanding of this, that the first stage of the creation of art would be what I would call the generation of material. You make stuff exist that never existed before.
Yeah, very good.
And then there's the selection of material. Mm-hmm. You go through this big kind of like soupy stew, or this kind of like chaotic mess, and you're kind of like it's like you're what's it called when you've got I see I'm miming down here, but people can't see what I'm doing. You've got to mime up here on Zoom, haven't you? You're sieving. It's like you're sieving for gold through sand to see if there's anything useful. You're selecting, and then you're articulating. Mm-hmm. So generation, selection, and articulation.
And what does the selection? Because I think I know what the first one would look like if I was watching you do your process. But what does the second one literally look like?
So what I'll do when I'm making a play is the first thing I'll do is I'll make a notebook for the play. Okay. And I'll kind of go and research a whole load of things and just write automatically, and write intuitive and impressionistic and abstracted responses, and then write kind of considered responses. And then the second thing that I do, and this kind of goes back to something you were talking about in the adaptation, is I'll type out the entire notebook.
Great.
And what happens when I type out the entire notebook is I'll find that a lot of the things that I've written by hand, I've no memory of writing.
Great. Yeah.
And as they've come from a place that I'm not conscious of. Mm-hmm. And often the bits which I have no memory of writing are the really, really useful bits.
Yes. Yeah.
And then I'll look through the notebook, and I'm more like a detective in that way. Okay. But I'm looking for specific things. So I go through the material, and I'll be looking for stage images, lines of dialogue, perhaps. Yeah. But mainly characters, actions, and situations, and I'll build the characters from the kind of unconscious soup of the notebook. Great. And build a story out of the characters. And as it goes further and further on, it's like the development of a photograph, of like a Polaroid, as it becomes clearer and clearer in the process. Do you have a process for making your original plays that you could kind of say, this is what I've tended to do? How did you write Anatomy? I remember reading Anatomy for a Suicide, and I was an associate at the Royal Court when that play came in. It was originally written for the Royal Court. It wasn't written for the Royal Court, was it? It wasn't a commission.
No, it was written for a very brilliant, surprising that it was written for a theatre company called Plains Plough.
Oh, yeah.
They had given me, it was a co-commission for them and Watford. And Watford is a sort of, has a theatre just outside of London, and it's a beautiful, great big Pross arch.
Yeah.
No one had ever asked me to write for a big stage like that before in a serious way. And I was absolutely shitting myself. And I had seen an image, and I can't remember where I've seen it. I don't think I've seen it since. So it's a terrible moment where I've stolen something and I have no idea how to credit it properly, but just this image of an opera, a production of an opera, and it just was very long and had lots of different rooms, and that had been sort of in my head for a long time. But it's that thing of Anatomy was a product of lots of things that I'd been thinking about for years and years, and then it was the first play I'd written since having a baby and having my first child. But it's always I think I need to think about it for a long time. The only things that have remained, I suppose, in my process is I need to think about it for a long time, and I need to wait for the form and the content to like closely align as possible before I can start.
Is that a pure process of waiting, or do you kind of make notebooks or notes or anything like that when you're looking for that alignment?
No, I think it's waiting. I think it's just waiting. I sort of feel a bit superstitious about writing anything down or keeping notebooks. I start lots of notebooks and then I sort of feel ashamed that I've written it down because it's already not what it was in my head, or I haven't let it cook for long enough. So it sort of isn't going to be, it's not ready. So I love that. I love your notebooks and then typing them out. I think that's beautiful, and I totally see the idea of a Polaroid developing. I think that's so clear.
But the notebooks for me are never consciously attempts to articulate a play in dramatic form. Right. I think what I really share with you is that one of the most important parts of making a play for me is just waiting. Mm-hmm. It's just sometimes the waiting might be quite active waiting, or it might be, what I often do with plays is I'll kind of, I'll identify, say, other artworks that are in some sense thematically related to what. I love Peter Brook's phrase, the formless hunch. Have you come across that phrase? No. I really like it. I think it's in An Empty Space. And it's a very simple phrase to describe how for him plays start. Which is, and I like it a lot because for two reasons. One, it kind of describes that vague sense that I get when I think I might have an idea for a play. Mm-hmm. It's formless and it's nothing more than a hunch. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, there's a thing. It's over here. I don't really know what it is. Yeah. But I think I keep looking at it. I don't know why. And also I like the word hunch because it makes me feel like a detective. And that's fundamentally all I ever really. I see that. But I think for me, the first stage after the crystallization of this formless hunch is to leave it alone. Yeah. Not do anything. Yeah. Because I do the podcast and I've interviewed you in my podcast, and I talked to the playwright Jez Butterworth, who's also had plays at the brilliant Atlantic Theatre. He's one of the great British playwrights who's a friend of the Atlantic. Oh. Everybody give all your money to the Atlantic, all of the money, all of it, just give it all to the Atlantic. No, I mean, I don't do that. That would be terrible. You might have children or other things you need to spend your money on. But it's such an important theatre to me. And it's beautiful that it's caught you in their roster. But Jez was there before me. When he talked about that process of making a play, he said he knows he's got an idea for a play when he's had it for 15 years. it's still there. Did you really have Anatomy for 5? Did you, or was it a slow crystallization.
Yes, yeah. Slow crystallization, definitely. I mean, there's just things in it that I know were there 5 years ago, definitely,
Right.
like 5 years before it was written, for sure. But yeah, I mean, I think Formless Hunch is lovely. Sarah Kane said someone had asked her what her play was about, and she said, I can't tell you, but I can tell you what material it's made of.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And I think
That's really nice.
that are lovely.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's sort of similar, isn't it? It's sort of like synesthesia almost. I can kind of taste it. It's like up here.
What substance is it most likely to be in that stage for you? Is it a material, or is it a color, or is it a smell, or do you know? With me, it's always music. It's always a piece of music.
And it were always like one and a specific existing piece of music, or something that you can hear that. Yeah.
I want to say that you know, I mean, I've done like blinking loads of plays now. Like, I've done enough. I really should just stop.
No.
But so I'm nervous about kind of generalizing, but I kind of want to say that often a play exists in the kind of the triangulation between two existing pieces of music.
Right.
So I'll take like kind of a piece of Purcell, and then a piece of kind of death metal.
Yeah.
And I'll imagine what triangle that made, and think if I could do that on stage, that would be the play that I would want to.
Great.
I would want to do. Do you have an art form or a substance that you?
I would say, I mean, it's definitely not music.
Right.
Definitely not music. I think it's like visual art. It's probably.
Yeah, I was going to say painterly or.
Yeah, paintings and photographs.
Yeah.
And then other like short stories, I think, and poems.
Right.
Yeah, I think there's a lot. Like, I think Anatomy of Suicide is, I'd been reading a lot. I think its influences are very legible. I love your Purcell and some death metal. That's beautiful. I think, like, it's yeah, I think it was that there was I was reading a lot of poetry, lots of short stories, and there's always sort of visual art is always a big influence. But that hunch bit, I don't know. I like the idea that, that I think there's something about anatomy. I knew that it was water, probably. There was something about it that was like as a kind of material. Does that make any sense?
No, that's such perfect sense. I mean, not just in the kind of literal sense of the dangers of water that are present within that play, but the fundamental fluidity, and the way in which the piece feels like three streams that intersect and run like a river and then might kind of like disperse again.
Yeah.
I think water feels very present in that play.
Yeah, a few.
What I do when I've left it for long enough, I've never left a play for 15 years. But I might leave it for kind of like 8, 9 months, 10 months. And I'll be doing other stuff like being a dad or writing other things or doing some teaching. But then I'll start kind of identifying like things I want to research to kind of try, and that's where I'll generate the notebook. So I'll kind of think, all right, for this type of play, I want to watch these movies, I want to read these novels, I want to listen to this music, I want to go to these places.
Yeah.
I want to meet some people who do this job, and then I'll build a notebook out of that research period.
Yeah.
And then try and somehow be searching for the kind of character and the action and the situation and the location from that process.
Right. I think it might be the opposite. I don't know. Maybe I'm just wanting to say this because that would be interesting, wouldn't it? But but I suppose I think the stuff happens at the thinking bit when I'm still like I haven't quite found the form. So that's the like, okay, well I'll and maybe this is also it for you. I don't know. And then it's about like shutting out, like making as much quiet as possible and really kind of narrowing, making sort of try really seek. And I think that's sort of something as well about, I'm writing with two very small children around, like I am constantly, I write in the middle of the night. I am constantly looking for the quietest place, like, and the like get rid of the other stuff, I think.
How has being a parent changed your work? Do you know, apart from that need for quiet becoming more acute?
Well, that's another big question. So I'm serious.
I think about it's one I think about quite a lot. I tell you, because I like when I started. So I wrote a whole load of plays before I had any professional work at all, kind of like fringe work and student work. And I did all kinds of jobs. I was working as a school teacher, and I had my first child. So I'd done all this kind of, Oscar's 21 now. He was born on the day that the Royal Court told me that they were going to produce Bluebird, which was the first play that I had at the Atlantic. I got home from hospital after Polly, my wife, had a 48-hour labour. I got back home, and I gather it was quite hard for her as well. But you can imagine it was it's very hard for me. I got home, and in my memory, the phone rang pretty much as soon as I walked through the door to tell me it was the late 90s. It was before I had a mobile. It was the days of landline.
It was, yeah.
And they were ringing me to tell me they were going to produce Bluebird. But then when I got more involved in professional theatre, I remember this kind of aphorism, which I gather was coined by the Manchester writer Cyril Connolly, that the pram, I guess the US audience might call it the stroller. Did you use stroller in Anatomy of a Suicide? Did you have to update the language?
I don't think anyone says pram. So
okay, cool. Right.
There was there was the mention of WKDs. Do you remember WKDs?
Yeah, I do, yeah. We should talk about the updating of Americans. It's really, really fun.
Yeah, really.
Something I've always wanted to do with one of my plays, and I've never been allowed to do. So I'm fascinated how you did it. But the pram in the Cyril Connolly coined the aphorism: the pram in the hallway, the stroller in the hallway is the enemy of creativity.
Yeah.
And that's so sat against my experience of what being an artist and a parent was. But because I was just kind of starting out professionally, I kind of felt as though I was in some way making a major mistake, not only by having a child, but by thinking that I'd underestimated how damaging being a parent was to a writer. But I don't think I'd have written anything any good if I hadn't become a dad. But I know it's very different. It's different for all writers, and clearly parenting and writing are both very gendered things.
Yes, for sure, definitely. I think it's very conscious that normally we'd be in a theatre and my children would be away and there's two sleeping ones, just in the room next door. I think
quietly.
Yeah. No, I think honestly, of course it's really complex, isn't it? Like I think for me, and I don't think this is true for other people at all, but I think it definitely in some places has allowed me to go deeper and sort of but essentially the kind of mother I want to be and the kind of artist I want to be are in complete opposition, and that is painful.
Right.
But there's the opposition of that and the sort of necessary searching I do within that and the kind of messing around within that and that kind of painfulness, I think informs the work, which hopefully makes good work, but it makes it all hard. I find it all really hard. Yeah.
Do you have a notion of what artist you want to be that's separate from the process of making art?
I want to give absolutely everything to it. Like I sort of tend to be very all or nothing about everything. in
Right.
life. And yes, so I suppose that's the kind of mother I want to be as well, which does not make for a healthy parent. I'm sort of conscious as well that it would be good.
I don't think there's any such thing as a healthy parent.
No, sure.
If I've learned anything about parenting in these last 21 years, is that we are doomed to profound failure. And the best we can do is kind of like fail with a certain level of kindness.
No, I think that's really wise, and I think I suppose that it's the failure. There's sort of pain in that,
right?
There's sort of I feel, and I'm constantly exploring this in writing. But as soon as I've attempted something, I've failed because the idea I had in my head was perfect. So as soon as I've written a word, or as soon as I've picked the baby up, it's sort of gone wrong, and that's But I think I'm in danger of romanticizing it all. I think a little bit. I can lean into it. But
I don't know. I don't know if it's about romanticization. It's something that's really big for me in my kind of like in my work and my life and my parenting and all. You know, my being in a marriage as well is a process as well, right? It's a process of kind of like which carries its own failures and successes. And I remember something that I've written about, but which ironically or fittingly, maybe not ironically, fittingly, was a question that my eldest son asked me kind of about 7 years ago when he was about 14. Right. And he was going to bed one night, and I was saying goodnight to him. He was getting quite emotional and quite upset, and I said, "What's the matter, mate?" And he kind of said, everybody, he was talking about school. He said, the thing with school, everybody always says to him, it'll be worth it when you get there in the end. Just work hard, it'll be worth it when you get there in the end. And he said, it's like you go on this journey, and it's all about this kind of like journey, and the destination will define and make up for the mess and the agony of the journey. And he said, but what if you never get there? What if there is no end? And then he kind of went to sleep and went off to school the next day. And the next day I was just like, Jesus Christ, why is my 14-year-old? I thought, like one of the most profound questions that anybody asked me. And I was happy that I kind of nearly got an answer that I was happy with, which was, I said to him the next day, I said, the thing is, mate, there is no end. There is no end to the journey. The journey doesn't end. You're absolutely right to intuit that. There is no end. So the point isn't necessarily about the destination. The point is that you revel in the journey, and you make sure you look out the window, and you make sure you're sitting next to good people, and you've got your tunes lined up on your phone or whatever, and you've got something good to read, and you're eating well, and you just revel in the journey. And for me, being an artist is kind of more like that than having this notion of what an artist is. It's all a big kind of like messy exploration.
Yeah.
I think parenting, teaching, and making plays come from the same place for me. I do think for me they have a shared synchronicity, I think. Which is gone.
Well, does it bring, I wanted to ask you, because I met you in the way that I think lots of young writers meet you, which is that I came to see a play of yours, and you were being very kind and talking to lots of people in the bar. Lots of people wanted to talk to you. Mainly
in a bar. That's
not that. And I said I'd written a play, and you said, "Well, send it to me." Gave me your email address. And I emailed it to you. You read it incredibly quickly. Emailed me back. Took me for a fish finger sandwich at that nice cafe on Essex Road.
Yeah.
Bought me a cup of tea. Took me very seriously. Talked to me about playwriting and about that play. You'd read it really properly. You told me what you thought of it, and you said, I'll email it to some people who I think would like it. And I mean, at the time, that was absolutely extraordinary anyway. But I think about that kind of the sort of energy that it feels like, and I could be wrong, but it feels like that, all of that, like it brings you a lot of joy, and you're able to, write lots of plays and meet lots of writers and actors and other artists and parent, and like, but I suppose it feels like it from the outside, it looks like that nourishes you in a really wonderful, beautiful way. I feel like I really try to do that, but I find it very draining, all of it quite draining and quite painful. And I find it, I don't know, is my assessment right? Do you sort of, it feels like theatre is a community for you, a really important community. Is that accurate or wrong?
I think it's really fundamental to me, yeah. I think I'm missing it acutely. Because I think, you know, I love the way, you know, people shouldn't mistake my reading of kind of like writers who are in the early years of their working lives as being an act of philanthropy or generosity. I steal constantly from young writers, from old writers. I steal all the time from every play that I kind of read. But it kind of feels as though the writers I meet who are in their 20s or their late teens, like the writers I meet in their 70s and 80s, we're all doing the same job. We're all part of the same. I very much like the kind of image, like something out of an Escher print, that we all kind of stand on each other's shoulders. And I don't feel any spirit of competition or rivalry with playwrights, partly because I think it's impossible to write one another's plays. Much more, I feel excited when a writer is writing with an honesty or an openness or a formal invention. It feels like they're opening doors that I can walk through. So the plays of yours that I've read have always felt like a door, you're opening a door that I can then walk through. So if I'm generous in response to that, it's because I feel empowered by it.
Oh gosh.
You know, I feel massively empowered by Anatomy and Revolt, she said, and all of the plays of yours that you know, I think you write with such poise. And grace and honesty. It's a real inspiration to me. But yeah, I think when I teach, I get more. I learn more than I get more than I give. I think, and I don't think I'd be able to write about anything if I didn't have kids. I don't know what I'd write about. I do, like, in a kind of serious point, when I kind of contextualise my, like, arrival in British theatre at the start of the noughts. I came in the tail end, like I was like the fag end of the in your face moment, as it's called in England, or I prefer the German phrase, the blood and sperm plays, but writers like Sarah Kane, who you talked about, or Mark Ravenhill, or Anthony Nielsen, or Jez Butterworth to a degree. I came after them. I think if I added anything to what they were doing, is that I put parents in my plays for the first time. You know, Sarah's plays are defined by absent parents or orphans. Anthony's plays the same, Mark's plays the same. And I think in Herons and Bluebird, On the Shore of the Wide World, I kind of put families back on stage. So I think I get, you know, my kids always say to me, like the eldest one especially, but all of them kind of say to me, when are you just going to make something up, Dad, instead of like stealing it from our lives? maybe the thing is your kids are just quite little. When they're older, you'll be able to use them as material mercilessly.
Yeah, I hope so. Fingers crossed they're fun.
Have you always found writing difficult, like that, agonizing or painful, like the adjectives are used to describe it?
I know, I'm really careful to say things like that, because I think that can I think sometimes that can feel like it's supposed to be necessary, and that's why I think it's so brilliant when it brings joy. Yeah, I do. I find, I mean, it's also incredibly cathartic.
Yeah.
And you know, there are many good things about it, that, like, I don't just keep coming back to it for a kind of masochistic, you know, but it's but yeah, it feels like very physical. It feels like something that needs to be wrestled.
Yeah.
Do
you enjoy watching your plays?
No. Never. No.
Never. I mean, never. I enjoy watching them after press night, after opening night.
Oh no! See, I quite like it up until opening night, because we're still working, so I can
Right.
still change shit. But no, a woman once sat behind me at a play of mine, and she didn't know I'd written it, obviously, and she just leaned forward and she was like, "Stop it. You need to stop it." It was being very distracting, because I was like doing that.
Say, stop it, I'm really enjoying this play and you're ruining it.
I don't think she was enjoying it. I just think she couldn't even get to try and enjoy it, because
What's your physical gesture of choice when you're watching your play?
Katie Mitchell, I didn't realise I did this, but Katie said, said to a whole room, "Okay, Alice isn't enjoying this because she's wringing her hands again." A lot of, it's good.
I do a lot of rocking. I do a lot of like kind of like that when I'm. But then after opening night, I kind of think like after it's open, there's nothing I can do then.
Yeah.
I can just and then I quite like the nights when I go with my mates, or I go with people who don't work in theatre. I go with my mum, or maybe take the kids if it's not too horrible and That's the other good thing about the kids getting older, is they can start reading and watching my plays, and then our family television is like the television that you're making fundamentally. So like we all sit on the sofa and watch Succession.
Yeah.
But so I do like that. I do like it, and I kind of I love actors. I profoundly love actors.
Yeah.
And
you write for actors. Are you doing that more and more, or like you have written?
Yeah, I am, and I'm starting to bring actors in on the moment of conception now.
Great.
So I've just finished the new play, which I wrote in the first weeks of lockdown. I kind of planned it. I've done my usual process of kind of like developing it, thinking about it, mulling on it, researching it, getting the notebook, typing the notebook out. I'd kind of planned it, I'd structured it, I knew the story, the characters, the situation, everything was in my head. I just needed 2 or 3 quiet weeks to write it.
Yeah.
And I didn't know where I was going to get the 2 or 3 quiet weeks from. And then lockdown happened. It's like, wow, I've got all this, all this wonder. So, and with that one, I brought the actors it was written for, kind of New York-based actors, Mike Shannon and Paul Sparks and Tom Sturridge, and kind of asked them to give me films to watch and plays to read and books to read and novels to read and art to look at and music to listen to. And I built the notebook out of their suggestions and kind of crystallized the notebook out of their minds. So it became a hive mind thing. I wrote a play for MTC in New York, which is written for Edie Falco, which is really, really gorgeous. And it's a really fun thing I did because I like walking. I like going for walks. Mm-hmm. And I got a map of Manhattan, and I got her to put her handprint on the map of Manhattan and drew around her handprint, and then walked Edie Falco's handprint around Manhattan and kind of tried to find the play in the handprint. It was really good. It was really good fun. Although I wish I'd angled the hand differently, because actually the fingers just rather conveniently went up the avenues. So it's actually turned it the other way. So it was more going into like below 14th Street. It would have been a much more interesting walk. Fundamentally just going up across the road and down again.
Good.
Oh, Claire here. Can I God mic in? Like a bit weird of me, but
great.
You guys have inspired some pretty extraordinary questions, and I'm hoping I can ask you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Clearly, you've got people thinking. I love this one. How did you put the first word on the first page of your first play? Do you remember?
Wow.
Do you remember your first play, Alice?
No.
I can do a physical answer to that, which is I typed it on a typewriter, an old portable typewriter that I got when I was. I remember when I was about 12 years old. I got a book from my mum's bookshelf, and it had, and it was a kind of detective novel. It's like a Pulp Fiction detective novel. And it had a photograph of a typewriter on it. And I just thought it was so cool. And I just wanted a typewriter. Like before I'd written anything, I knew I wanted to be a writer. And part of being a writer was getting a typewriter. So I got this typewriter, a portable typewriter, and I think the first play I wrote when I was in sixth form was an adaptation of a Tom Waits song called Frank's Wild Years from the album Swordfish Trombone, and it was about a guy who murders his own. He gets drunk one night and he sets fire to his own house with his wife and their dog inside it. And I wrote a dramatic adaptation of that based in England. That was my first play. Do you really not remember your first play? Were you one of those people who was writing plays as a very small child? Did you do like plays?
Well, I mean, I've talked to you, but I wrote a pantomime when I was 7. Like, I made my friends do it. But I mean, that was no. I mean, I suppose I don't remember. That's a brilliant. What a great question. I wish I had a good answer. I know though. I do know that I will have written something, deleted it, and written a new 100%.
Do you ever write on a typewriter?
No, so cool.
It's so rubbish, really impractical, like profoundly impractical.
So what a great sound.
It sounds great. It's actually a real pain, and it's a pain because are you a good typist?
Yes. Yeah.
Did
I
you
did
train
years
as
of
a typist?
temping. No, I just did years and years of temping and
Right.
working in offices and doing. Yeah. So yeah, no, I'm fast.
I showed my daughter a film of Jerry Lee Lewis playing the piano this morning because we were talking about writing and typing, and I said I type like Jerry Lee Lewis playing the piano. Are you familiar with Jerry Lee Lewis, the kind of 50s rock and roll, Great Balls of Fire?
Yes, but I wouldn't.
So he plays the piano like this. He's like, and he kind of smashes it with his elbow, and kind of plays it with his feet, and that's what I'm like when I'm typing.
Very good.
That's amazing. We have one that's combo comment question, but I'll read it because it's quite nice. I'm a British actor based in New York City. Love to London, my hometown. And for both of you, when you think of theater in New York City, what are the best and most exciting elements of the community here and differences between London and New York? Thank you for today. So good to hear you talk.
Oh, cool.
That's nice.
Do you want to go first for that?
I feel like I should. I mean, like I just had just had a play on there, and I mean, the company was so warm and friendly and sort of so tight and so sort of serious. But I'm trying to think if there's something that feels very different between the two. I'm sure there is. I've just been reading a lot of plays that happen to be by American writers. I've been reading lots of Jackie Sibley's Drury's plays and Stacey Osei-Kuffour and Ming Pfeiffer, and there are just some extraordinary playwrights coming out at the moment from the States, and that feels like super exciting. Yeah.
What defines their
They're just, I mean, those 3 women, I suppose that they're just, those plays have been like formally like nothing I could have ever imagined, like just brilliant, funny, savage, really clear, sort of, I don't know, it just feels like they know exactly what they're shooting for and they fucking get it. In a way that just feels really thrilling. I suppose I've always felt like we're so lucky here, like the writer, the culture around the writer and the different ways in which you can get into this industry. I mean, yes, it's really hard. I'm absolutely not saying it's not hard, but there are theatres above pubs all over the place, and there are writers' nights, and there are great communities, and I don't know that I knew that was in New York and as much as it totally is.
Are they New York writers? I don't know those writers. This is me being
not all 3. Jackie and Ming are both based in New York, but I think Stacey's in LA. I don't. Yeah, someone. So the New York people will know much better than I. I may have just made loads of stuff up.
I'm so intoxicated by New York as a city. I think I always say I learned to read by reading Spider-Man comics. So as you know, when I was like 4, before I went to school, I used to look at these Spider-Man comics. So from my earliest memories, it's a city of story, you know, and a city of character and kind of adventure. And I mean, I would distinguish between Spider-Man and Superman. I think Spider-Man is much messier and dirtier and kind of like broken than many of the superheroes. So it's a city in which broken people do remarkable things. I think that kind of like can apply to a whole load of different manifestations of New York. And every time I go there, even being there, I still somehow yearn for it. And you know, and being away from it in the last kind of 4 months, this is the longest I've been in my own neighborhood for about 30 years.
Yeah.
And I yearn for it deeply. I guess in terms of the theatre scene, I think characteristics come from the same, you know, problems and possibilities come from the same place. I think there are some problems with New York theatre in comparison to British theatre or other European theatre. The lack of subsidy, I think, is really problematic. And Broadway as a defining end game remains legible in a lot of New York theatres that I've worked in. But what's exciting about the New York actors that I've worked with and directors I've worked with and the writers that I've read, and I've not read as widely as you, but the tension that they find between the success imperative and the kind of Broadway imperative and the possibility for genuine creativity, I think is really remarkable. And there's great actors and great directors. And they operate in that tension between making a dollar and making beautiful art, I think.
That's very generous. Thanks.
It's all right, Claire.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you. I think we'll do one last one, and I recognize it's sort of existential, but we only have a few more minutes, but let's see.
That's how we roll. That's how me and Alice roll.
We'll see what you'll do with it. You are writers after all. What do you hope theater looks like on the other side of this incredibly dark time?
Wow. Do you have a strong answer for that? I've got impressionistic instincts, but I don't know if I've got a cogent answer.
Go for your impressionistic instincts.
Maybe we could share impressionistic instincts. We could take it in turns.
Yeah, that's nice.
I think it's going to be really, really important. Like, I've got profound faith in its importance. I think when I think about the function of the storyteller, I think the human being is the storytelling primate. We make sense of ourselves, and our capacity to survive comes from our ability to make sense of our experience in narrative and to pass those narratives on. I think we're going to live through a time in which we have to, for economic and medical and political reasons, we have to reimagine who we are as an animal. And I think the storyteller and the storytellers will be fundamental to that process of reimagining. I think, you know, we'll come to value an awful lot of things that have been taken away from us, and one of those things will be the assembly of strangers. You know, there's the assembly of humans together in a room. I think the process of a group of strangers coming together in a room to engage with the possibility of a story for a while out of an attempt to make sense of who we are, I think will feel like a miracle when we come back, and I find that I'm really optimistic about that.
Oh man, I should have gone first because I think I'm a pessimist, and we should end on your optimism. I don't know what it will. I think that's beautiful, Simon, and I follow your hope, and I will endeavour to follow your hope. I don't yet, but I will. Yeah.
I think it'll be more skint. But that might not be bad, right? We won't have as much money. So it'll depend on actors and writers.
I hope so. So I think that big old subsidy thing you just talked about is, yeah. But we'll find spaces. It'll happen.
Stunning. Thank you so much. I think we'll bring Neil back in as well and say a quick thank you and goodbye. Wow, you guys are some thinkers. Thank you so much for sharing that with all of us.
It was a pleasure.
Hi, Neil.
Hey,
Hi,
Neil.
Hi, that was amazing, you guys. That was so, and really moving and beautiful and just wonderful to hear you talk. You know, as you were talking, I was thinking off of that last question too. I realized that you both in your plays, at least part of your plays I've experienced, have this extraordinary exploration of grief. And I've been thinking about grief a lot in these times, but the way you were talking, also thinking about grief and hope. And I find that both of you have dealt with that in ways that for me watching was really a revelation. So there's something about hearing you guys talk about your work and your process in these strange times, because I think we're all going through a certain amount of grief, and we're also going through a certain amount of, you know, hopefulness that we can transform and do great things. So I just say that out loud because it's such a treat to have you both from across the ocean and staying up late on a Friday night. Yeah. So just thank you. And thank you to everybody who's joined us, and thank you, Claire, for making this happen. Yeah.
Yes, it's really my pleasure. And these are the highlights, you know. It's so strange to not be in rooms together, to your point, but this feels like another kind of room, a room we might not have had otherwise, and especially not because the two of you are over on the other side of that great big ocean. So in some ways it's sort of a blessing. This is a blessing. So yeah, thanks so much for making the time, and, you know, while parenting, which is not nothing, in the midst of all this. So to all of you who joined and asked such extraordinary questions, thank you. There were some good ones that I'll be sure to send over to Alice and Simon too, because I think you'll want to know what thoughts people had as you spoke. We have these Live with Atlantic sessions each Friday at 4 o'clock Eastern time, so we hope you'll join again. We put some information in the chat if you'd like to join again. We'll also circulate this recording sometime next week for those who didn't have a chance to join us live, or if you really want to dive back into these brains again, which you might. And as Neil said at the beginning, if you have the means, if you're enjoying these sessions, we hope that you'll consider making a donation of any size to Atlantic. And thank you, Alice and Simon. You're the best.
You. Thanks.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.
You guys.
See you soon, guys. Take care.
Lots of love.
Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.